We're back here on the Lynn Hayes Freeland Show. You should probably be aware of the fact that Election Day is Tuesday. Now, if you don't have an absentee ballot, for the most part, unless you get a court order, you go to court to get an absentee ballot. The polls are open 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. and you may want to check the county website because a number of polling places have been changed. So check and make sure yours is not one of them. Wallace Bright is here, and I want to talk about now the race for the newly created 17th district, which is kind of interesting because Connor Lamb just ran for that 18th district back in the spring.
Right. Then when the new 17th district was created, it ended up that both he and Ross are in the same district. So, you know, you have the only race in the country, actually, where you have two incumbents running against each other. Situation. Keith Rothfuss, who has been around now, this is his third term in office, so he's been around for a while, you know, trying to make his mark in Washington. Connor Lamb has an approach to government that is sort of reflective of his generation. They want to see government do things for citizens, and at the same token, they want government to back off a little bit and let people function on their own and not have their hands sometimes restricted by government. And I find that to be a very interesting approach to government. I find that is something that both parties need to look at in terms of their leadership and bringing some of these younger individuals into the forefront of their leadership within the two parties. You know, that race is an interesting one. Connor Lamb has worked his rear off, to tell the truth. He has really worked well in that district. You have a great deal of that district that was part of the old 18th, too.
Okay.
And so, you know, he's been there before, kind of, in that spring race. So he's worked very hard. He's also ahead in the polls. He has a nice lead in the polls. But again, I keep reminding people, we saw what happened 2 years ago in terms of with the polls. It all depends on turnout.
So we talk about turnout now, and I said I wanted to talk about this referendum. Are a lot of people going to the polls because they want to send a message to Washington, to President Trump, that either they're with him or they're not? Sure.
I think that a whole lot of this entire election cycle has come down to that. For Republicans, it is, you know, in many regards, those people that went with Donald Trump probably from the beginning, he's given them a lot of what he said he was going to give them. I mean, he's got, you know, 2 conservatives on the Supreme Court now, you know, dozens of other conservatives on other courts. He gave them their tax cuts. He's had deregulations. You know, he gave them the things that he said he was going to give them. So, I mean, okay. So, you know, to them, it's to prove, okay, we continue to support you, okay? For Democrats, it's the opposite. For Democrats, it's okay. You know, you came out, you took an approach that we feel that you shouldn't have taken. Now, Democrats are going out to show him they oppose him. They have another set of policies. And if they are able to capture one of those houses of Congress, what they need to do is start working on those policies and moving forward toward 2020.
So who matters the most in this election? A lot of people seem to think it's going to be female turnout.
Yeah, and it's going to be, and one of the reasons is, you know, certainly the number of female candidates, they're going to be on the tickets. You know, it's going to be a whole lot of females, you know, have been nominated during the primary system, and, you know, it's very important that, you know, they be supported by other females. I mean, you know, the reality is, and you don't necessarily want to or assume that gender politics moves any differently than anything else. But, you know, let's face it, we have less women in our political environment than any other developed nation in the world. And, you know, we need to make a change there. You know, we need to put some fresh faces, new ideas into the political system.
Now, the whole debate around Supreme Court Justice Kavanaugh technically is history. It's behind us. He is on the Supreme Court. But there's a lot of residual effect or wake in light of that, isn't there?
Oh, you're going to have a great percentage of both turnouts are going to be because of Judge Kavanaugh and the Kavanaugh confirmation. On the one side, you're going to have that group of people that feel that, you know, he was mistreated, he wasn't dealt right, and we're going to show those people that did it to him that, you know, we stand with them and we stand with the president and his nominees. On the other side, you're going to have people that say, you know, this guy probably should have been withdrawn. This guy probably should not be on the bench. And we're going out to elect a Congress that will oppose maybe some of the things that a court may rule now because of Judge Kavanaugh is on it.
You know, one of the things that I try to avoid is discussions, conversations that there's no easy resolution. So I'm not going to talk about all of the things that people talk about coming out of the White House. I am going to ask you, however, do you ever, we only have a minute left, do you ever remember a political climate like the one that exists right now?
No. In my lifetime, no. You know, probably in a historical sense, I can remember reading about a time that probably we're talking about close to 200 years ago that was somewhat like this, very contentious, and a lot of it because of personal reasons. But, you know, in my lifetime, no. I have not seen this kind of thing. And again, a lot of it does come down to personality. It comes down to people taking a very personal and not a policy-driven approach to politics.
I'm going to get you to commit to this right now on the air, because I want to do a show sometime in the near future that just kind of looks at our candidates now, who's running for office, who we're electing, because celebrity, I mean, you know, you hear stuff like Dwayne Johnson, The Rock, thinking about running for president. What is that? We'll talk about that on the next show.
Okay.
Perfect. Don't forget, Election Day is coming up Tuesday, November the 6th, 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. The polls are open. Check and make sure you know exactly where your polling place is. When we come back, a new play at City Theater. It's called Pipeline, and it's got a subject matter you will be surprised about. Don't go away when the Lynn Heath Freeland Show continues.